So, sales folks, salespeople, auto salespeople, you sell cars and you get objections along the way. We at Product Prep like to call them addressing concerns. Because oftentimes the customer just has a question. So let's start with the meet and greet. What happens during the meet and greet and how to handle objections during the meet and greet are areas of concern. When you say to the customer, you're here for sales or service, and they say, I'm just here to look. You say, you're just looking, great. I know where everything is. Let me show you around. Anything in particular you're looking for? What research have you done? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to take them to trip and fall school. I'm just kidding. What you're trying to do is manage the flow of communication. Because if you don't manage it, they will, and you get lost and you get way off track. So follow the road to the sale, but more importantly, manage the dialogue. And how do you manage the dialogue? By asking questions. What research have you done? What brought you to our dealership? Not what brought you to our dealership. What inspired you to come by our dealership? And they mention this particular car. What attracted you to that particular car? If they're looking for a pickup, why a pickup? If they're looking for a van, why a van? If they're looking for a sports car, why a sports car? Because what you're doing is you're trying to determine an open dialogue with the customer, and you're trying to actually eliminate some of those objections that you're going to get with just looking. But if a customer says, I'm just looking, say, great, I'm glad you stopped by. Let me show you around. Let me share with you what we have available based on what you're most interested in. Oh, by the way, what research have you done so far? What have you found out? What vehicles are you attracted to? What particular model are you most interested in our dealership? What brought you by our dealership? No, more importantly, what inspired you to come by? Have you contacted the dealership before? Again, just asking questions to change up the dialogue and to get back on track to just the meet and greet. Let's talk about the needs assessment. Now we get into the needs assessment as a sales consultant, because once you meet and greet a customer, you want to start determining their value drivers. What's most important to them in the next car? And again, that question, what research you had done, or if they're there for a particular model or particular vehicle, what attracted this vehicle? Have you spoken to anybody here at the dealership or contacted a dealership? Have you visited our website? Have you visited the manufacturer's website? And once you determine if they did or they didn't, find out what they found, what they saw, what is they're most interested in, simply by asking them questions. What's most important to you? Is it safety, performance, appearance, dependability? What are the most important components or features of a vehicle? Those are the things you want to learn during your needs assessment. And if the customer is apprehensive to give you information or resistant in giving you information, you got to probe. You got to keep asking those questions, because what you're doing by asking those questions is you're actually forming connection with the customer. And once you form that connection with the customer, you're able to move more forward down the road to the sale. So now that you determine the customer's value drivers or the car that they're most interested in, you want to isolate a particular vehicle. So you take them out on the lot, you show them a vehicle, you pull it out of the line, you isolate it, and you do your wonderful walk around. We like to do the space walk around. We talk about safety. We talk about performance, P. We talk about accessories and appearance, A. We talk about convenience and comfort, C. We talk about economy, and then we talk about dependability. That's what the space walk around is all about. And what you do is you almost like regurgitate some of the things they said to you during the needs assessment. That's what great salespeople do. And that oftentimes will eliminate a lot of resistance or apprehensions during that road to the sale or during that walk around. And then one of the most important things you need to do is you need to get them in the car and drive it. You should take the wheel first and then hand the wheel over to them. You should keep quiet. Just make sure they're comfortable and just ask them, how's it feel so far? And then once you get back to the dealership, one of the most important things you can say to them, if you like the vehicle, park it in the sold line, because we have other salespeople, and this is a very popular model, and they'll ask you where the sold line is. And you bring it right to the sold, tell them where it is. And then you step out of the car and you simply ask them, do you want the car? And they're most likely going to say something like this if they like it or want it. I want it, or maybe, it all depends. And we know what it depends on. So the core issue here is don't bring up objection or a concern by saying, oh, I get it. You want to know what the price is. And stop asking customers, by the way, if we could agree on price, are you ready to do business? Because that puts total emphasis on the price. Rather than say that, say this. Say, if we were fortunate enough to find a vehicle that fits, are you in a position to proceed? And so far, I think this vehicle fits everything. Let's go inside and I'll go over the numbers with you. So now you're setting the tone and presenting numbers to the customer. And when you present the numbers to a customer, this is when the rubber meets the road. And this is where you need to overcome customers' apprehensions or resistance to the figures, addressing their concern. You're going to put those numbers in front of the customer and say, these are the figures, and shut up. and wait for them to respond to the numbers. They may say to you, "You're not giving me enough for my trade," if in fact they had a trade. You simply look at them and say, "Okay, are you saying we're not giving you enough for your trade because you want to lower your payments, or you feel your trade is worth more because you've done some research and saw it? Or maybe perhaps another dealer gave you more." There's nothing wrong with having that type of dialogue. It's very upfront and transparent. And if they say another dealer gave me more, ask them what the difference was, the cash difference on this particular vehicle or a similar vehicle. How much did you have to come up with along with your trade? Because what you're going to do is you're going to narrow it down now. You're going to make them realize that you're really not that far on the trade. Because let's face it, you're really never that far off on a trade. The customer may indicate that you are, but you know that the appraisal is always going to be within a few $100, maybe $500 to $700 difference. And if you can get them to focus on the cash difference rather than the trade allowance, or you can get them to focus on the payment rather than the trade allowance, you can have a much better result in closing a deal. Let's say the customer says those payments are too high and you presented multiple payments. In other words, different options with various down payments and terms for financing. Or maybe you gave them a lease term as well. What you want to do is you want to ask them, what is the closest payment you're willing to go on this piece of paper? So that you're not going into a battle of dollars and cents. You're honing in on what's the closest payment. And then you say to them, we can get there with a little bit more money down. How much more money can you come up with? Those are the questions you want to ask. We call that staying in your seat rather than jumping up and saying, the price is too high, I'll be right back. I'm not giving you enough of my trade, I'll be right back. Again, I talk about dialogue a lot. You want to talk, you want to get the customer talking. You want to get the customer to open up. Remember, 90% of the customer's journey is done online. And then they go to the brick and mortar, and you drove them there based on the conversation you had with them, or the texting or emails that you sent back and forth. Or perhaps they have a friend that bought a car there, or they bought cars at the dealership before. There's a reason there sitting in front of you, and you want to find out what that reason is, because you want to substantiate the reasons why they're sitting there. You want to basically say to them, look, man, you're here because you had a friend that bought a car here. You've bought other cars here before. We're going to treat you right. You know we're going to treat you right. Let's narrow this down. Let's get this thing done. We're not that far apart. We're not that far apart. $100 is not that far apart in the payment. I know it seems like a lot on the surface, but you need to reduce it to the reality. $100 only represents $3 a day. Is $3 a day going to change your lifestyle in a way, shape, or manner, Mr. Jones? Customer says, no, it's not. But certainly having to pay, or certainly if you didn't pay the extra $3 and you were driving a car that wasn't the one you wanted, you'd be pretty upset about that, knowing that you could have spent $3 more. Because after you've owned the car for a few weeks, you may get sick of it. You may say, I wanted that other car. I wanted that car with the other options. These are the things you need to say to your customer. How about when the customer says to you, I want to think about it. After you did a wonderful presentation on a vehicle, you landed them on the right car, you think everything's going well, you presented the figures to them, a little bit of negotiation, and they said, you know what, I just want to think about it. Don't ask them what they got to think about. Ask them what other vehicles they're considering, because in your mind, the only reason they shouldn't be buying a vehicle, if you did everything right, is because they are considering another vehicle. Simply ask them what other vehicles you're considering. They may tell you. And because you have competitive knowledge of your competitor, you're able to compare both the vehicle that they're interested in, the other vehicle they're considering, and the vehicle they just test drove. And ask them, after test driving our vehicle, how does our vehicle compare to the one you test drove earlier? And don't ask them if they test drove the other vehicle. Tell them they did. Because what you're doing, you're just staying in control of the dialogue. You're managing the dialogue. They may say to you, I didn't drive it yet, but still ask them, how'd you like the ride of this car? Do you think there's a better ride out there? And what's going to influence you to buy the other car versus this car? Again, it's nothing more than asking questions, and that's how you handle it. So let's get back to I want to think about it, because that's probably one of the most common objections you're going to get as a sales consultant, because some people are just afraid to pull the switch, and you got to pull them over the fence. What are the vehicles you're considering? Well, I'm really not considering another vehicle. And the best question you can ask the customer at this point is, what's preventing you from moving forward? And oftentimes the true objection will come out. Well, I really want to go home and discuss it with my spouse. Well, that's great, because I would probably want to discuss these decisions with my spouse as well. But I'm assuming that you've had discussions before about this, right? You've discussed it before, or you wouldn't be here. Again, you're making assumptions rather than asking the questions, because sometimes you have to make those assumptions to keep the customer focused on your conversation. I want you to think about that for a second. If you ask vague questions, you get vague answers. But if you ask direct questions, You get direct answers. So I'm sure you have discussed it with your spouse before, right? Well, yeah, I have. Well, what do you think she's going to say? What do you think he's going to say? Well, I don't know. I got to go talk to them. Let's give them a call. You want to make it personable? I learned this from another sales consultant in another industry. Ask the customer what their spouse's name is. My wife's name is Betty. Oh, what do you think Betty would say? Oh, let's give Betty a call. My husband's name is Chuck. Let's give Chuck a call. What do you think Chuck will say? Now you make it a little bit more personable. How about the customer just simply says, man, I love the car, but I didn't anticipate spending that much money. Keep this in mind. As I mentioned earlier, 90% of deals are manufactured over the phone or through the internet. They know what prices are. Sometimes they just go to the dealership to see if they can get a better price than they got on the internet. And you need to remind them that the internet's the lowest pricing. So it's going to be very difficult. And if this is the car you want, you're going to have to be faced with spending a little extra money. But it's $100 more than I wanted to spend. Look, there may be another way of looking at it. Open the door to better dialogue. There may be another way of looking at it. And the customer, because they want the car, may say to you, what's the other way of looking at it? Simply look at them and say, you realize that $100 a month represents $3 a day? The customer's probably going to say to you, well, yeah, that's right. And you look right at them and say, is $3 a day going to change your lifestyle? And I got to tell you, most customers would probably say no. They say, great. Because I'll tell you what, driving the wrong car is probably going to be, uncomfortable. Wouldn't you agree? So why don't you just step up, spend the extra $3 and have the car you want? After all, don't you deserve it? Well, I had a better deal somewhere else. And you're saying in your mind they got a better deal somewhere else. What are they doing sitting there? What type of deal do you have elsewhere? Don't ask how far off we are. Simply look at them and say, we can't be that far off because we all pay the same amount for our vehicles. We all appraise the vehicles pretty much all online. So if it's a trade allowance, maybe I can get you a few more dollars for the trade, maybe a couple more $100. Again, all you're trying to do is open up dialogue. There's no scripts. They work. Word tracks work, but all they are is a roadmap to success. And the lesson that needs to be learned in any word track, a script that you use, it's not so much the word track itself or the script, it's the principle behind it. And once you learn that principle behind those word tracks and scripts, you're going to become a very good sales consultant. If you want to learn more about how to overcome customers' concerns in sales, you need to check out prodprep.com. We now have sales certification there as well for those of you who want to get into auto sales. We have F&I certification for those who are in sales and want to get an F&I. That's the best advice I can give you. So I want to wrap it up this way. The best way to overcome customers' concerns is by asking questions and following up with logical answers. Remember, when asking questions, don't ask a question with the intent to reply. Ask a question to understand the customer's concern and then address the concern accordingly. So until next time, go get them.